Welcome to the second installment of the Weird Drum World Book Club. This channel is all about inspiration, and one of the most inspiring artists of the late 20th century was definitely David Bowie. His way of reinventing himself and the quest for originality in his work not only gave us some of the greatest music in pop, but by doing so also many outstanding drum performances. From Mick Woodmansey's work in the early 70s to the harmonizer-enhanced drum sound of Dennis Davis on the Berlin albums, the meat and bones drumming of Tony Thompson and Omar Hakim on Let's Dance, right up to Mark Juliana's more modernist approach on Bowie's last album Black Star, there's a lot to explore in Bowie's catalogue. Since his death in 2016, there has been a flood of new and republished books about every aspect of his life and career. There are scientific studies of Bowie's late period work, lavish coffee table books about his relevance in fashion and art, coloring books of his most iconic characters, and even a book about his favorite books. As you can see, it can get quite confusing to find the ones worth getting if you're interested in his music. What I'm trying to do here is recommend a couple of books that will give you a well-rounded overview of Bowie's career and especially his music. So let's start with the biography. Dylan Jones' David Bowie Alive was one of the first biographies published after Bowie's death. I have to admit I'm not the greatest fan of oral histories. As we all know, our memories are mostly unreliable and therefore not always to be trusted. But then again, stories told by those who were there, even if some details may be incorrect, can give us a kind of authenticity that even the best research cannot achieve. Jones interviewed more than 180 people and gives us multiple accounts of different episodes so that a credible picture emerges in the end. What's more, he had the opportunity to interview Bowie himself on several occasions throughout his career. This book is also one of the first ones to cover the last years leading up to Bowie's death, a period that is notoriously hard to research, as he and his family were very strict about keeping their life in New York as private as possible. Overall, I find this to be the most balanced account of Bowie's life so far. It is very well edited and therefore not only informative, but also great fun to read. So this comes highly recommended as a start for those who want to dig into everything Bowie. My second pick is more of a traditional biography. But whereas the first book is about David Bowie's entire life, Dave Thompson's Hallo, Spaceboy, The Rebirth of David Bowie, deals only with the time period between 1987 and 2006. This book is a well-researched and at times very funny examination of Bowie's return to form after his commercially successful but critically shunned mid-80s albums and tours. And it's a good thing that the book was written while Bowie was still alive. It is more level-headed for it, because Bowie wasn't the untouchable icon he became after his death. Thompson takes a critical look at Bowie's ill-fated Tin Machine era, which was in part a result of Bowie's struggles with his record company EMI. But he also acknowledges that this was part of the process that allowed him to return to his experimental roots and finally re-emerge as a cutting-edge artist with albums like Outside and Earthling. But the 1990s and early 2000s were also a time when Bowie was on top of his game in terms of live performances and tours. In little more than 10 years, he traveled the world with shows ranging from experimental, almost avant-garde performances like the ones he did with 9 Inch Nails or in support of Earthling, to his career-spanning best-of reality tour. Hallo, Spaceboy is well illustrated and looks into one of Bowie's most interesting periods. It nicely shows how important reinvention was to him and how he managed to return once again to creative fulfillment and cultural relevance. Let's switch perspective for a moment. Did you ever wonder who played the weird piano part on Aladdin Sane? Well, meet Mike Garson, the musician with the longest-running association with David Bowie. Garson was a touring member of the Spiders from Mars and stayed on until the Young Americans album in 1975. He might have missed the Berlin era and the commercial 80s, but he rejoined Bowie live and in the studio in 1993 and stayed by his side until his last official live appearance in 2006. In Bowie's Piano Man, Clifford Slapper tells the story of this incredible musician and sheds light on many of Bowie's most important records and tours. Even though Slapper sometimes seems a little too in awe of his subject, this book is a great addition to the list, as it shows a musician's perspective and gives us much more insight into the creative side of Bowie's career than most books. Bear in mind that this is not a book about Bowie, but about his keyboard player. But Garson is a fascinating character with an exceptional dedication to his craft, so I encourage you to read the whole book and not only the parts about Bowie. And make sure you get the revised 2018 edition, as it contains a lot more information than the original one published 4 years earlier. For this next one, let's head a little further back in time to what was probably Bowie's most influential period in terms of its creative impact on contemporary music. His time in Berlin from 1976 to 1978 is associated with a trilogy of albums that hold a special place in many musicians' minds. Even though only Heroes was recorded in its entirety in Berlin, Low and Lodger belong to the same era. Bowie escaped to Berlin from what was probably his most self-destructive phase ever. Exhausted, high on drugs, and unable to cope with the trappings of fame, he barely made it out of LA alive. Berlin finally provided the anonymity and remoteness needed for a fresh start. It's fascinating to see that for the first time in his career, he seemed to be totally free in his music. With a renewed appreciation of life and without the immediate need for chart success, experimentation was key. Working again with Tony Visconti, Brian Eno, and the rhythm section of Carlos Alomar, George Murray, and Dennis Davis, which he retained from his previous album Station to Station, Bowie created a sound that not only shaped pop music to come, but also had a great influence on electronic music. Tobias Rüther's book Helden, David Bowie und Berlin provides insight into this very special time in Bowie's career. An English edition of this book is available. I just happened to buy the German one when it first came out, so this is the one you see here. Now I saved the most important one for last. If you are a musician or a fan, and you get only one book on David Bowie, you just can't go wrong with The Complete David Bowie by Nicholas Peck. As with the book on Mike Garson, make sure you get the latest edition, which at the moment is the one published in 2016. This 800-page tome is the end-all of Bowie's scholarship as far as his music is concerned. Peck provides encyclopedic information on every single song, album and tour Bowie ever did. Even Black Star, information on which was kept mostly secret until recently, gets 8 densely written pages. If you want to know who played bass on Young Americans, or how many vocal takes Bowie did on Wild is the Wind, this is where you'll find the answers. Tours are covered equally well with information on musicians, repertoire, publicity efforts and rehearsals, as well as memorable performances. There are separate chapters on Bowie's sessions for the BBC. Of course, a complete discography up to 2016 is also included. This is not a book to read cover to cover, but an excellent reference to answer specific questions or just to dip into once in a while and find answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Speaking of which, it was the great Willie Weeks of Donny Hathaway fame who played bass on Young Americans, and Bowie did 7 takes of Wild is the Wind before eventually choosing the first one. Thank you, Nicholas Peck. To recap, here are once again the 5 books recommended in this video. David Bowie Alive by Dylan Jones. Hallo, Spaceboy, The Rebirth of David Bowie by Dave Thompson. Bowie's Piano Man by Clifford Slapper. Helden, David Bowie und Berlin by Tobias Rüther. And The Complete David Bowie by Nicholas Peck. And there you have it, my choice of the 5 essential books on David Bowie. Hope you liked the video, and as always feel free to leave a comment if you disagree or have other recommendations. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.